Why did we just all have the complete silence? I thought you were going to jump in.
I thought you were going to go.
Oh, you were muted.
Yeah.
You look like you were getting ready to say something, so I held off.
Yeah, but then
Classic
I was like,
podcasting.
oh, my mouse is too far. It's fine. This is all get cut.
You're listening to The Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of The Janchi Show. Now, today, it's just me, KJ, flying solo on the intro, and the interview that we have lined up for you is fantastic, but it's just myself and Nathan. Patrick is still off figuring out how to sleep, essentially, because he's got a newborn child. And so we are in a new look in this season, but we're still committed to bringing you episodes and interviews and stories and content and hopefully some laughs and some insights into what it means to be an adoptee and a transracial adoptee from the continent of Asia at that. We call ourselves the Janchi Show because Janchi is a Korean word that means to feast or to celebrate, and we are here to celebrate our identities, all of our intersectional identities that make up who we are. And typically at the end of the episode, we feast on a food or a drink from usually Korea. However, again, due to a number of logistics and sickness and all this other stuff, there's not a food at the end of the episode. So this is just like, it's just a new time. We're back in the saddle, kind of. We're crawling back into it. Be gracious with us. But yeah, it was a really, really fantastic interview. So we're going to roll straight into it. Here is our conversation with Kate Kelly. Hello, welcome back to our interview portion. We are here with a fantastic guest, Kate Kelly, calling in all the way from China, right? I probably should have confirmed that before I started recording, but coming in from China. Kate, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you on.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
I'm excited because I was reading through your guest form and I was like, just kind of like glancing through it. Okay, I'm getting ready, see Boulder, Colorado. Okay. And I see China. And in my head, I thought that you were a Chinese adoptee. And I was like, oh, cool. Another one of those stories. And then I was reading more, but like, I'm not Chinese. Wait, what? So then I was like, wait, what's going on here? So I'm excited to hear your story, and I'm excited to give you this opportunity to speak to our listeners and the world at large, whoever stumbles upon this. Would you please open this conversation up by telling us your story in as much or as little detail as feels good to you?
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yes, I am not Chinese. I am a Korean American adoptee. And you'll see it with my story. Over the last 3 years, I've been explaining and over-explaining that I am not Chinese, living in China. So I was adopted at about 8 months old in 1982 to a white family in Boulder County, Colorado. It's a small town called Louisville, Colorado, and grew up with 2 older brothers, also biologically my parents' kids. So white family, white brothers. One of my brothers is actually only 8 months older than me because, how the adoption process works out. You kind of sometimes get your kid whenever you get your kid. It could be like a long time from when you file your paperwork or like next week. So I arrived when my middle brother was only like, a toddler. So we're only 8 months apart. So we grew up as twins in the same class and everything. So that was an experience because we're obviously not twins. And
I'm sure I got that question a lot.
Oh yeah. Are you guys going out? Is that your boyfriend? Because we'd walk to school together and back. Yeah. Once we hit middle school, we got a lot of those questions. Right. And so let's see. And then my other brother is about 8 years older than me. And let's see. I am married. I am a mom of 2 children. My husband is white. Our kids are mixed. and we are living in Chengdu, China, in the Sichuan province. We've been here since fall 2021, and we were in Shenzhen for the first part of 2021, or I'm sorry, the first part of our China stint. Shenzhen, China, which is a little more international than the province we are in right now. And in August 2021 is when, let's see, there was something, Khan did something. I was like registered or on virtually. Khan was doing something, I don't know. And that's when I came upon you guys, and then the other adoptee community on Instagram and started connecting that way. And then basically just dove down the rabbit hole and did a bunch of work on myself, watching all the side-by-side series on through I Am Adoptee, and came out of the fog and came to consciousness. And a big part of that, I think, was living in China and being faced daily with my physical identity, because everybody thought I was Chinese, a local, because this country is so ginormous that when somebody sees an Asian person, you just assume they're Chinese. So, yeah, it was just very laborious every day going out and explaining, I'm not Chinese, I don't speak Chinese. And I didn't have the language when we first moved to China. I only speak English, so I didn't have the language to say in Chinese, I'm not Chinese. So I had to learn very quickly how to do that, basically as a defense mechanism. And for me, I was being talked at. They were just talking at me, and it's very overwhelming when you're fresh off the boat from the US. So, yeah. So I did. Yeah, I had the time and emotional space at that time when we moved to China to do the work that it takes to explore my Korean adoptee identity, my Asian American adoptee identity. And so I did that fall. And backing up, let's see, in 2009, 2008, I went to Korea for the first time, just as a tourist, to explore the culture. It was really amazing for me. And then I went to my first con in 2019, and that was a really good experience for me too. And though those two experiences, I still wasn't out of the fog or hadn't come to consciousness yet. It was more, it was just, still a really good experience connecting with the culture and connecting with fellow adoptees at con. I still have a group there are 5 of us who stay in regular contact on a thread. From that con. It was all of our first con. And that's been really helpful, I think, for all of us. And really cool to see how we've all navigated our journeys since. Some have gotten more involved in their Asian and adoptee communities. Some are doing advocacy work, and it's just really neat to see, what all happened from there. And that was only 5 years ago now. So yeah, that's kind of my experience so far with navigating adoptee and identity stuff.
First off, let me say thank you for telling your story. It's been a while since we've done an interview, and I don't ever want to take for granted the incredible privilege that we have of having people come on the show and tell us their story. So thank you for your generosity in telling your story. I'm fascinated by the fact that you went to Con in 2019 and were not out of the fog. You went to Korea in 2008, not out of the fog. That's not as surprising to me. But it was 2021 that was like really the thing. So can you describe to me like how you thought about yourself as an adoptee, as an Asian American woman, pre, I guess, 2021, and then after that, like what's the difference, I guess?
That's such a good question. I love deep, juicy questions like that. Let's see. I think as first going to Korea as a tourist, I think I just was, and I went by myself. I think I was just literally this like American tourist in disguise, because I had, the Korean exterior. I like to say I was
Because you
in
weren't just
disguise.
walking around with an American flag on your body somewhere and just be like, look, I'm American.
Right. I didn't look like a foreigner. Actually, I did, but at first glance, I didn't. I was tan because at that point, I was running a swimming lesson program, and so I was in the sun a lot. And Koreans typically are very fair and do not like the sun, so I definitely stood out in that way. And anyway, so I was in Korea as an American tourist, and just taking in what I could. Oh my gosh, eating the food was incredible. That was a really huge experience for me. Just the food made me feel so different than any food I had ever tasted. Just the taste of it, but also just how it made me feel. I felt alive. I didn't feel like heavy. I didn't feel bloated as I typically did with American foods, all the foods I had growing up.
You weren't eating dairy. You were.
Yes. Everything was so fresh. I think all the fermented foods and pickles really, now I know, really helped my gut. So that was just a huge tip off for me that maybe this is really where I belong as far as nourishment. And definitely helped me kind of shift the way I was eating once I returned home. I don't know. I was just in such a different mindset when I went there. And again, I didn't go there for a birth search or anything like that. I just went there as a tourist and just curious. I was young. I was 26, I think. And I did do a file review. I did do that. That was intense for sure. And found out more information than what was in the file that my adoptive parents received, some original documents that were not disclosed. So that was really intense and very emotional. Wasn't expecting that. But again, still wasn't out of the fog, still just kind of went through the motions. And but I felt like I returned to America, and I felt more of a connection to who I was physically, and had a little more pride, I think, in being Korean after that. But also there was also still a barrier of that's the culture I came from, but that's not who I am. I think, I didn't have any Korean friends in America or a Korean community. So yeah, it was just kind of something I did kind of almost to check a box. And obviously, and I definitely wanted to go back, and I haven't been back. And here I am so close to Korea. I have wanted to go since we've been here, but COVID and all of that. So then to keep answering your question, with Khan, went to that. I knew about Khan for about a decade before I finally went, because it was just I backed out once because I just wasn't ready. I registered one year, and it was like a few weeks before, and I just wasn't ready. And then even I remember the first day of Khan, I was so nervous to go to that first session, which was an adoptee only welcome session. I was so nervous. And, I talked to my husband, he came with me, and our son too. And I was like, okay, here I go. He's like, you're going to do great. It's going to be all right. And then you walk into this room, this hotel conference room with 100 other Korean faces, Asian faces, brand new to Khan, all feeling the same way you do. And I think I was like a couple minutes late. So there's already this circle of chairs formed, but everybody just like moved their chairs and let all the latecomers in. And it was just like this, you just walk in and you're already embraced with this warm hug of emotion from these people that are strangers, but they're not. So that was incredible. And going to that, just showing up as a Korean American adoptee, curious, open to connection with others. I think that was like the biggest thing for me when I went is it's really important to go open, because you never know what'll happen, and it just provides space for other people, for connection. It just provides space for connection and possibility, and you're showing up as you, vulnerable, and kind of, if you show up that way, you're kind of giving people the green light that, hey, you're approachable. Let's be friends, or let's connect. Let's have a conversation. I think that was really important that I did. And yeah, I didn't have the language during the trip to Korea and my experience at Con of coming out of the fog or coming into consciousness. I didn't have that language. I didn't know that was a thing. So when I went on the trip, and then when I, 10 years later, oh my gosh, it was like 11 years later, went to Con, I just went as myself and just curious, and didn't really have any expectation. Just like, oh, what's this? Let's give it a try. I'm ready. I have like the courage to go this year. And it's not like that for everyone. I know people who it wasn't a good experience for them, and that's okay. Everybody's going to have a different experience, but mine was really wonderful. It would have gone in 2020. I think it was canceled because of the pandemic. And then I think 2021 was online. And I think I did log on for that. Yes. So, and I think that's when I first found the Janchi show, because you guys did something with Katie, like a snack thing. And that's when I
did like the opening session, sort of.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, we're just going to record it and then
interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, KJ, but, when you don't have the language for things, it makes a big difference, and you just kind of are going through the motions. And then for me, I found this community in 2021 where there was a language of the process of stepping outside of your adoption narrative that you've always known, and looking at it from a different perspective, and considering how you actually feel about different pieces from your vantage point, not anyone else's. And that was what happened for me. That's my definition of like coming out of the fog. When I started seeing posts from people about what this was, I was like, oh, okay, this is a thing, and I'm not alone, and other people are going through this, and this is possible. And, again, those side documentaries were hugely helpful. I felt like I was watching myself in so many of those different stories, my own story. And it was just very comforting to know that I wasn't broken and there was nothing wrong with me. And it like normalized my experience and my feelings and emotions. So yes, my long-winded answer, KJ.
No, that was great. And I love, so what's interesting to me, and I think you're probably one of the few guests who aren't like deeply, like literally Glenn Morey, who's done the side-by-side project, or a Jaron Kim, who is like an academic, or Dr. Kim McKee, like two like literal doctors in the field of academia thinking about adoptees. But what's surprising to me and delightful is I hear you using some of the language that they've developed, some of the language that has been in our community. And so that's why I was like, I'm curious if you were able to talk about who you were then as opposed to who you are now, because it's really fun to hear people say like, oh yeah, what it's like to be fully conscious as an adoptee, or coming, like more than just coming out of the fog. I'm so grateful for Jaron Kim and others' work to give us this type of language, but just hearing you use that, and like to have that kind of own new vocabulary, like as we continue to grow and evolve as a community, right? That we start with out of the fog, and you go to your first, whether it's your first adoptee meetup, your first adoptee podcast, your first adoptee blog or video, whatever, you start to sense some of the rhythms and the language of how we speak to each other. And so it was just really interesting for me to hear that. But one of the things that was also very interesting to me, as you were opening up in your question, was you were talking about being fully conscious and going through that process in China. And you specifically highlighted being an Asian American Korean in China. I wonder, what was it like to be coming to consciousness in China as an American? Like was that like, because for adoptees who came to consciousness in our wave, if you will, around the 2020 era, I feel like there's a lot of, like there's the meta narrative of everything that was going on in America, and the way that we all reacted as men, as women, but certainly as Asian bodies. And then you moved away and then you had this whole other landscape to deal with, and certainly probably maybe some nationalism, if not like racism per se. But what was that like?
Wow. I love your questions. They're so, so good. Well, I'll start by saying, since you referenced 2020, when things started happening, when our then president started making references to Kung Flu and the Chinese virus and all of that. I mean, I just remember watching in horror. We were living in Florida at the time. My jaw dropped. I'm watching in horror of all of these things he's saying to the world. And, my husband was over to the side, I think, running his job from home, preoccupied with that, but it felt like the magnitude of what was happening and what the then president was spewing was just sickening. And I felt really scared. I mean, it was so dangerous, all the things he was saying. I felt so scared as an Asian person in that country and as an American. And I just knew something bad was going to happen, was coming, because of his following and the things he was saying. So I remember feeling very happy to be leaving the US when we did. And it was the first time as an adult, after things started happening to Asian people, that I felt really unsafe. And we were in Boise, Idaho for a year before we moved to China, because that's where my husband's family is. And we wanted to spend a year there knowing we were going to be so far away. So we relocated from Florida, where our kids were born. We'd been there about a dozen years, and we spent some time in Boise before we moved abroad. And we were in Boise, and I was looking for a storage unit to put all our stuff. And there was a shortage on storage units at the time because so many people were flocking to Boise, I think from California. And surprisingly, there was this shortage. And I remember for the first time in my life feeling like if I walk into if I walk into this business, they might not serve me because I'm Asian, because of the trend that was happening. And I felt really just intimidated by my own society and by my own culture, to just exist, to just like go ask for a service. And so instead, I called the storage unit facility because they can't tell I'm Asian because of my voice. So, I mean, like all of a sudden, I mean, I'd never gone through this before in my adult life, this type of discrimination that I anticipated the discrimination that was going to happen. I think many of us had to. So I called, and because I just felt like, okay, if I'm going to walk in, they might say no just because of how I look. So, anyway, all that to say that I was ready to leave the States when we left in fall of 2021. And now here it is almost 3 years later. We've had quite an adventure in China, being a foreign family in China, and we're ready to come back. So, which we are coming back this spring. So, back to your question. So yes, definitely a layered experience coming to consciousness out of the fog as a Korean American in China.
I was just struck by you like holding and specifically calling out like Asian American woman as like a Asian American Korean adoptee, but like the concept of, I mean, I guess like shame on me, but I guess I was like, oh yeah, because like you could blend in, quote unquote. If you never open your mouth, then you could potentially blend in China. And like to me, I think what I was feeling is my consciousness journey has also been really in lockstep with, I think, broadly the Asian American consciousness journey in America. And it's been like, it's just very tied to American culture. So what is it like to come out of your previous life, your whatever, to come to consciousness outside of the strappings of America while being still American, still aware of those things, but it not necessarily affecting your day to day in the same way that it would like living stateside?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I think giving myself the space to process on my own, physically, because I didn't have the camaraderie of like physical friends to get together with and, process this with as I was going through it. So I was on my own during the day. The kids would go off to school. My husband would go to work, and I have the privilege of not having a job at the time. And so I just would watch the series, do a little research, connect with people through Instagram. I think that was huge. That was my way of processing with community, was liking things, DMing. Katie Gagel was huge. You guys, I think Patrick, I commented on some of his stuff. Another part of my journey that we can talk about at some point was a biological cousin reached out to me at the end of 2020. She's like wild. And she's awesome. She's Korean American. Her parents immigrated from Korea in the 70s. She's like a third cousin, I think, but like a significant one when you do 23andMe. She's like a 2.2% connection.
It's not 0.001.
Yeah. It's not a 15th cousin. Yeah.
Twice removed. Yeah, whatever.
Exactly. So, community via Instagram was helpful. And I just kind of did a lot of it on my own, soul searching. And then I love Brene Brown. I listened to her podcast regularly at the time and read her books. She's been a huge part of my journey, I feel like, because I really resonate with a lot of the things that she talks about as far as belonging and perfectionism and all of those things. So that can be challenging with for anyone, and I feel like especially as adoptees, as transracial adoptees.
Yeah. I wonder a little bit about like how your exploration into the things that you could find online stuff, media, stuff like that, has also a similarity to other adoptees maybe who are in secluded rural areas of the U.S. where they don't have a whole lot of adoptee resources as well. They kind of tiptoe into something and dip their foot into it, and then they go, ooh, I want more, but I don't have a whole lot in my vicinity. And so then they start exploring, like you said, the different types of media. And I feel like that's what I would do if I was in China. I wouldn't have any other resources because I wouldn't know the language. I wouldn't know where to go. So the first thing I would jump to is the internet or to podcasts or books or things like that, and have that kind of almost in a way, because I have less to do, because I'm in an unfamiliar area, I would jump in even more, I feel. But did you find that as your main hobby, I guess you could say, at that time when you first got there?
Definitely.
I
Hobby,
love
yeah.
describing it as a hobby, just a
Yeah.
casual journey into
It's just
into
a
yourself.
hobby. It's
Yeah.
gonna
I
look
think
at
Nathan.
himself.
I think Nathan. I refer to it as a passion project.
Yes.
It was my passion project. It was heavy. This work is heavy, and I've talked to other fellow adoptees. You got it. Sometimes you need to take breaks and come back to it. Sometime, and so that's what happened to me. I dove in head first. Had some uncomfortable conversations with my adoptive parents, and which actually went pretty well at the time. And then I needed to take a break. 2022, that school year hit, and I needed to take a break. For me, I just needed everything to just kind of settle, absorb, and then, I'm taking Chinese at the time too, to be able to get by, survive. Because it's very different for me. It's a very different experience than being a white foreigner in an Asian country versus an Asian foreigner. And so you're just bombarded with people talking at you and telling you something, but you don't know what they're telling you, or instructing you to do something, but you have no idea what they're saying. So I took a break, focused on like integrating into the culture, not integrating, but settling into the culture so I could get by. So I processed a lot with my husband, which was super helpful.
Did you ever find yourself glad that you could blend in there a little more as well?
Yeah, for sure. It's wild being in a situation in a country where you just blend in. It's nice. It's definitely nice. However, when I'm with my husband and my kids, that doesn't happen. And that's one of the reasons we're moving back. We're in a province that's very monoethnic. So sometimes in the area we are also is in the suburbs. It's about an hour from the city center, which there's a little more going on and more foreigners there, not many, but a few more. So we're out in the suburbs. There's like Chengdu is formed by rings. So the first ring is like the city center, and we're in the fourth ring. We're out. So sometimes when my husband and I are on a run, we'll run past these people and they will stop in their tracks, mouth open, and just stare at my husband. It's like, it's literally the first time they've seen a white person in the flesh, not on a screen. And then same with our kids. They get stared at, pointed at, snickered at, and people take pictures. In the States, obviously, that's inappropriate and malicious in the pictures. But here, you don't have that feeling. It's super annoying, and we don't like it. Some of my friends go up to the people and tell them, like, delete those pictures right away. It's just really odd. And, our kids are not circus animals, and that's how they're meant to feel when people are taking pictures of them, because they've never seen mixed kids. And then my daughter looks more like my husband. She's more of Caucasian features. You would never guess she was half Korean. I wouldn't, at least. And both of our kids have lighter hair. So yeah, our kids stand out. So when I'm with my family, we all stand out. And I guess they think I'm the IE, which is like the nanny. Here I am with this white family. But then they speak at me like, are these your kids? I don't know what they're saying. Are these your kids? Or, who are they? Or, or
saying,
are they
they're
tourists?
so beautiful. Wow.
Yes.
How lucky you are.
Right.
My wife and I went to China once, and I just remember being very cautious at the beginning of it, because we didn't know anything. We didn't know any of the language really at all. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know these people like trying to sell us stuff on the streets were selling us stuff, or they were trying to sell us something, or they're trying to take us somewhere. We didn't know. But toward the end of our trip, I do remember we finally realized from some other people that we had met that we could say "booyao."
No need. Don't want.
Exactly. And if we said that in a way that was quick and almost authentic, I guess, in a way, they wouldn't bother us anymore. And I thought that was funny, because if you saw somebody else, it's like, no, thank you, in English, and get hassled, they would continue to get hassled. Whereas
Totally.
if we said it,
Yes.
it just like booyah, booyah, and then they would
Yeah.
walk away. And I was like, I liked that ability to kind of almost blend in and not
Totally.
have them,
Yes.
hassle us a little bit more.
Yes, and actually, Nathan, like the more aggressive you say it, the better. Like that they like respond to that direct. And that was a big thing navigating the first 6 months, 9 months that we were in China. It's like there are no pleasantries here, and that is okay. Like pleasantries to them are weird. In the States, of course, like it's hi, how are you? You look at people when you walk, even strangers, eye contact, whatever, when you walk down the street. There's none of that here, and it's almost weird if you do it. So I didn't know that when we first arrived. And yes. And so I was, when people would talk at me, I'd constantly be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't, I'm a foreigner. I don't speak Chinese, or I, try to say it in Chinese. I'd try to constantly apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. They don't care. They, just say booyah, or I say, well, bushu zhangguren, which I'm not Chinese. So then what happens is they look at you, and then they say, but in Chinese, but you look Chinese, and they do the circle around their face, like they're arguing with you.
Circle their face like that.
Yes, but you look Chinese.
but your face. But your face though.
Exactly. And I'm like, and then I have to say "wushu Hangguren," which means I'm Korean. And then they're like, oh, or I would say "wushu Meiguaren," which means I'm American, but then they still look at me like, really? And then,
but you're not.
And then and so then I say, I'm Korean. So when I start off by saying I'm American, then they still look at me and they're like, okay, whatever, confused. So then I'll say like, and Korean, and they're like, okay. So then one time, here are my two funny stories. I'm in a taxi. Usually they leave you alone, but sometimes they talk to you. And he starts speaking to me, and I'm saying, I let him know I'm not Chinese, I'm Korean. So he's like, oh, so he gets on his phone, speakerphone through the car, and he calls a Korean friend, and he has this guy like start speaking Korean to me. Like, what? And so then I'm like, sorry, I'm American. So he's like,
I say that in Korean.
yeah, exactly. And so that was really, and that's one of those times, I think, back to what you guys were asking, it's like, it kind of stings a little bit. Like, I'm American, I'm Korean American, I don't speak Korean, and they're it was really sweet. He was trying to make a connection. Like, oh, I know a Korean here in Chengdu, let me connect you with him. And I couldn't connect with him because I don't have a language. And then another time I was checking out somewhere, and they knew I was not Chinese, that I was Korean. And so they put in their translator everything in Korean that they wanted to tell me. And I was like, oh, I'm American, so it's just very laborious constantly.
It feels very familiar with hearing other stories saying that their parents had tried to introduce them as children to like the local like liquor store owner or something who was also Korean, or like I've heard a lot of stories where they've always tried to introduce them to someone who's locally Korean or something, and try to foster that instant like like connection or something, where they're doing that. Yeah, they're doing the same thing to you, only over there they're trying to connect you with someone who's Korean, but who someone's Korean and speaks Korean, and it's like wait,
like nope, it's not me. That's
my family, when I was there, they called. It was like a tourist hotline or something while we were there, because we were talking in the car and our language was very minimal. So they called the tourist hotline to an English speaking information person. And then they handed me the phone, and I didn't know what they were doing. And then I'm sitting there on the phone and I'm like, hello. And they're like, oh, hello. Your family wants me to talk to you and give you some information if you have any questions. It was like a really weird. I was like, "Oh, so you're just like a tourist, like hotline,
like a translator,
translator kind of." It wasn't even a translator; it was just the English-speaking tourist hotline.
Yeah,
and they didn't ask me or anything; they just handed me the phone, and I'm like, "Oh, hello, who is this?" I was so confused, and I didn't have any questions because I didn't even know where I was.
No further
what am I going to ask? What's the average temperature in this region? It was really odd, but I did want to say, back to when you were talking about going to Korea and con for the first time. I just wanted to commend you also on that bravery of doing that, because I don't know many, like myself included, that when I first took a trip by myself, like I want to say I was, I don't know, 30. I think I felt, at a later age when I had the resources and the bravery to go to a place by myself. Especially it wasn't Korea, it was Australia actually. But for you to go to Korea by yourself to explore and just be a tourist, I think is amazing. And I wish I had done something like that sooner than 30. But also going to con, I know you talked about going to con for your first time, and I know there's a consistent amount of newcomers that come to con every year. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that, and what you, not to be, biased with con right now, but I personally am just more interested, because I've been involved in con for 3 years, but I'm still always fascinated with the history of it, and the hearing about people who knew about it way sooner than I did. Like you said, you knew about it 12, 13 years ago. I just found out about it like 5 years ago, so 4 years ago.
Yeah. Someone first told me about con way back it was around the time I went to Korea, actually. I was living in Colorado. I was living in Boulder. And it was a woman who was, I feel like, really involved with it. She was a Japanese American. She's passed away since, unfortunately. Older woman. And she was connected with this little group in Boulder. I don't remember what it was called. She was connected with somebody I knew who was adopting from Korea. Her name was Deb. This woman's name was Deb. And she was adopting she and her husband were adopting from Korea. And I knew them well. They had 2 kids of their own already. And they were curious about my experience. And at the time, I was a real people pleaser. I feel like I was just such a different version of myself. I was a real people pleaser, and I was like, yes, let me tell you about my experience. And I felt like they looked at me as this poster child for adoption. And I wasn't, looking back, I wasn't being authentic with myself, because I didn't have those tools, really. I was just existing. It was my early 20s, mid 20s. I was existing as the best I could. And these people were looking for support, and I was going to support them, because that's what I did, even if it didn't align with who I was. But I also didn't really know who I was as far as being
you're saying
an
a 20-something-year-old doesn't know who they are?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So they wanted to, actually, I think I volunteered. Hey, you're thinking of adopting from Korea. Let's talk. So, I connected with them. They were really on the fence about it. And then they decided to do it. And they invited me to go with them to Korea to get her, their daughter. And I'd never had any interest in going before. So I said, oh my gosh, I'm so flattered. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd love to go with you guys. And again, you don't know if she's coming next week or in 9 months. So at the time I was doing student teaching, so I had to be back by a certain time. I only had a window of time where it would work for me to join them. So the window was approaching, and the little girl still wasn't ready to be picked up. And so I said, I don't think it's going to work out. But in my mind, I was already like going. And so I decided I'm still going to go, because I was like ramped up to go, geared up to go, and excited about going. So that's why I ended up going by myself. So, and I met their baby before they did. That was wild. The same adoption agency that I came through. So when I did my file review, they arranged for the little girl to come to the orphanage and meet me. So that was cool. And the family loved that too. I brought pictures and everything. We've lost touch, but I'd like to reconnect at some point. So anyway, yes, in that community with my friends in Boulder, they told me about con, and I was like interested, but not, I just wasn't ready. was like, yeah, that doesn't sound like something I'm comfortable with. So I shelved it. And then fast forward, ended up moving to Florida in 2009. And I think it was 2011, 12 that I was registered to go. And then I backed out. But yeah, I think it's just I was afraid of like, I don't know, maybe I was just afraid of like that part of me that's never been explored. And so it was more comfortable to just not explore it, to stay in that comfort of not knowing. I just wasn't ready. So finally found the readiness. I'm not sure how I decided to go when I went in 2019, but I did. And maybe it was having kids. Maybe it was that my son was about, and that would have made him 6. He was 5.5 when I went. And so maybe that was it. Having kids for me shifted things with my own identity because I want them to feel good about being half Korean, because I never felt good about being Korean. So I wanted them to have a different experience than me and expose them to it. Do with it what you want, but this is half of who you are physically. From a young age, they started using chopsticks at home, just Korean chopsticks, and training chopsticks just to kind of expose them to that. So now it's funny, when they moved to China, they already knew how to use chopsticks as Americans, and they're Korean. I have some friends who are Chinese American and their kids don't know how to use chopsticks because they're just, it wasn't a priority for them. That's fine. So it's just funny. Yeah. So, anyway, so I think, having kids for me was pivotal in exploring more about who I am so that I could then impart some confidence in them as to who they are in that part of me. I just didn't want to raise my kids in resenting being Korean like I did growing up. So it was cool that they had sessions for like a whole kids club thing going on, and sessions for children and sessions for spouses. I love that. My husband and I went to some of those sessions for parents, adoptee parents and their spouses, talking about raising kids. And then sessions for spouses talking about being married to an adoptee. So I just felt like it's such a great way to connect with others, feel supported. It's just such a space. Khan has carved out this space of several days to just connect, and why not? And even if you're like trepidatious about it, it's just one of those things, like, just take a chance and jump in. And maybe it'll be, you never know. And maybe it'll be wonderful. And maybe it won't be for you, but you'll never know till you try.
Exactly. And that's great that you did. And that you found, you said 5 friends from that you still connect with. I mean, that's something for me. I mean, this podcast, I didn't, same thing. I mean, finding KJ and Patrick was something, that I found as a huge plus out of this as friends, not just as, podcasters and co-hosts and things like that, but as friends. I found that this, when we started it, it was like, why not? Let's try it. And you got to try it, and then who knows what's going to come from it. But the friendship came from it, something that has been great. And with Khan, same thing. The way that I found some community within the Khan volunteers and the participants, the people who come, the attendees. It's now for me more than just a healing process of going to this conference of adoptees that have some similar stories, but then some completely different stories and everything. And then I just find that I connect with the ones that I have, some things in common with, and it's been great because of that. And that's something, again, that I didn't expect out of it. I was expecting more of just like more information about, what it's like to be, a Korean adoptee, or hearing, other voices talk about their experiences. That's kind of what I expected it to be. I didn't expect it to be these close relationships in this community that I found from it. So
Mm-hmm.
so I'm happy that you did find that from that with those 5 people. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think every year people go, they find and meet more new people. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you again this year at that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. And I think it's also important to realize that we're all going to receive those experiences so differently. Sometimes it's going to be, if it's good for one, it might not be good for another. One of the friends I have, she didn't have a great first con, but it didn't prevent her from going again. But it was just, that was her experience. It wasn't great. And I really enjoy the diverse array of experiences that we all have. Some of us want to be in reunions. Some of us don't. Some of us had good reunion experiences. Some of us did not. And I think it's really important to acknowledge and be aware of just how different all of our experiences and emotions around our own stories are, because they're not all
exactly.
they're not all the same. They're not all similar. They're actually all really different. And then if you find people who have similar experiences as you, that's awesome. But it's also cool to connect with people who don't.
And that's great that you did that with your kids too. You know, the experience and just the culture that you want them to kind of be introduced to as well. I find that as something that is always pushing me to do more as well with my kids is introduce them to more things and not be afraid to talk about adoption with them or my Korean culture or heritage or my wife's Chinese and Japanese culture. And so we try to integrate that a lot. So I'm sure they're getting a lot of that in even being in China, getting some at least of the, you know, the experience over there and being close to Korea. I mean, just having any experience, I think, with Asian culture, I think is great. So
yeah, it's been a really interesting inverse experience with my daughter since she looks more white and now she's growing up. She's spent 3 years in an Asian culture. So it's like completely opposite of what I went through. So I remember in kindergarten, her saying, I want to be Chinese. You know, all my friends are Chinese. I want to be Chinese. And I'm like, sorry, you're not. So it's like when I was little, I'm like, I want to be white. I want to have blonde hair and blue eyes. You know, so it's been interesting to go on that journey with her, that identity journey. For sure.
So that leads me really nicely to my next question. So part of my personal journey for 2024, I don't really do like New Year's resolutions, but I do kind of have like a theme for the year, if you will. So for 2024, my theme for the year is embodiment and like feeling my body, being in my body, that kind of stuff. I'm reading a book that's really fascinating about kind of that journey. Something that we've been like kind of jokey about, but also like very serious. And there's always, like you mentioned earlier, like that twinge of like, is being Korean or being American, being enough of one thing for the perspective of one person or whatever. And certainly your kids being Korean American and white and in China and navigating that. And you said like, you know, I want my kids to love being Korean and feel good about being Korean, because that was not a thing that you had. And I think like, so I typically on the show, I ask some version if it comes up, like, how do you feel about being ethnically Korean as a different identity than being an adoptee from Korea, as a different identity than being Asian American? Because I think that that's like its own thing. Given all of the work that you have done in the past 5 years, and like your whole life and being in China and all that, how do you feel about yourself right now and being Korean American in China? Like, how has that shaped how you feel about yourself and like those kinds of like big physical identities that really kind of shape who we are and how we feel about ourselves and our bodies?
Oh my gosh. Your questions are
Casual
so good,
question.
KJ. Casual,
very
because,
casual,
you know.
sorry.
I love it. I love it. I wish more people ask these type of deep questions. I will be honest in saying that at times it's confusing, and I feel we all have ever-changing identities.
Mm-hmm.
My identity is so different than when I went to Korea, than when I went to Cannes, than before I came to China. I feel much more comfortable in my skin as a Korean person than I did than I ever have. One of the first times I actually felt pride in being Asian was after I saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon all those years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I came out of the theater and I was like, holy crap. I feel good about being Asian. Those people were badass, and I'm like that. I can be badass like
That's
that.
me
Like
up there.
Yeah, totally. So that was definitely in a pivotal moment. Yeah, I feel in this moment, I feel good about being Korean. I know more Chinese language than I know Korean language at this point. And if you would have asked me, in the past, if I ever thought I would know more Chinese than any other second language, I would be like, no way. Even the thought of moving to China when my husband was looking into the job, I was like, no, because it was so triggering. Growing up, it was Chinese, you're a Chinese kid, Chinese face, flat face, whatever. And so like the idea of China, it just was very cringy to me. So, in order to survive, I took a year of Chinese, very casually. It was like 3 hours a week with my teacher. And so, I wish I knew more Korean than Chinese, and maybe I will eventually. It's important to me because it just kind of, for me, it will help. I think it'll help me feel better about my physical identity if I knew a little bit of the language, where my roots are, and connecting with my biological cousin was pretty cool. Seeing someone physically that I'm related to, that I didn't give birth to, was pretty cool for the first time. And knowing that I have those roots out there is fascinating to me. I had this other really difficult experience when I was living in Shenzhen when we first moved to China. There was a community. We lived in these service apartments that were full of foreigners, and there were a few fellow Americans. There were some Russians, there were some Germans there, and then there was a very dominant group of Koreans, maybe 40 Koreans, and 20 moms married, and with all of their children. And I made friends with one of them because one of them spoke English, and she was wonderful. And we talked about how I was adopted and everything. And I didn't belong in this group because I didn't speak Korean, and they didn't really welcome me into the group because I feel like because I was a Korean American, but I asked my friend, I was like, is it because I was adopted? She's like, no. It's they're self-conscious about their English. They don't feel like their English is good enough to communicate with you. So that's why. And I'm like, okay, but it was this kind of odd tension, and maybe it was all in my head, but I mean, they would be like in a part of the lobby every day, like having sex with their kids and conversing. And I couldn't be part of that because I didn't have the language. And I really, really, I felt really sad when I was around them because I felt like I was one of them, but I wasn't. And if I wasn't adopted, I'd be one of them. And it was wild to be a mom and looking at all of these Korean kids. My kids played with the Korean kids because kids are kids and they'll play together. But it was really wild to see these little Korean girls. And, it was, so I was going through all of that, being this outsider looking in on this Korean community in China, and taking myself out of the fog at the same time and navigating my identity in China. I mean, it was wild. It was like the universe was just piling it on. And I was like, all right, bring it. So this beautiful friend named Mie was my Korean friend. And it was like, it's just one of those relationships you're meant to have at the time. Those friendships you're meant to have at the time. I told her my story about being adopted, and then she proceeds to tell me that when she was a child, her dad died. But her mom's family, was there to support them. And so it was just like, oh my gosh, like, I feel like maybe she was like, wow, that could have been me, like being adopted, because my dad died. And we were the exact same age. It was just wild to have this connection with her. So yeah, it was difficult to be in that space with these Korean families that I was also Korean, but I wasn't. So that hurt. I felt disappointed and sad at that time because at that time I, quote, didn't feel Korean enough to be able to be, in community with them. That was difficult for me. And it was like a daily thing, because I'd come in with my kids after getting them from school. We'd walk past this group of Koreans, they'd wave and be polite, but I couldn't go hang out with them because I didn't have the language. Then some of the little girls who were going to an international school there and spoke English befriended my kids, and we would chat, and I'd said, oh, I'm Korean. And they were super sweet. And then one day, Mie, my friend, introduced me to her daughter. Her name was Uni. And she's like, Uni, she tells her in Korean, this is Kate, she's Korean. And Uni says to me in perfect English, she looks at me in the eye and she says, what's your name? Your Korean name. And I had an answer for her. I did. I was like, Suna. She's like, oh. And then she like went off and played. But that was like, so, I don't know. That was like such an incredible moment in my life that I will never forget, because I felt like I felt Korean in that moment. I felt so Korean because I have a Korean name that I was able to provide a response to this little girl who was curious to know who I was. And that was just, I don't know, that was like such a gift in this time where I felt so sad and like I didn't belong again. That was a gift. So that was cool. That was neat. I hope I keep in touch with Mie, and hopefully we'll meet up in Korea one day. They're back in Korea, I believe. A lot of Koreans were there in Shenzhen because their husbands worked for Samsung, and they were relocated there as anyway. So, that was a part of my Korean identity that felt good in that moment. Be able to claim myself as Suna for the first time when someone asked, a little girl. And then, I'm just open, KJ, to how my identity evolves as I move forward in life. I am a very different person than I was even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, just living life and being open to what opportunities come along to grow. I always say growth mindset is huge for me. Not feeling complacent or stuck like in a fixed mindset of this is who I am, this is how it needs to be. It's really important for me and my family to embrace opportunities to try new things, try out different perspectives, learn different perspectives, and kind of feel out what feels good. If an opportunity comes along, like try it out. If it doesn't feel good, leave it, move on to the next thing. We're always changing, and it's for me, important to harness those things that come along that align with your values and how you feel, and just always learning. Super important.
100%.
Yeah. Speaking of feeling good, how is that then transferred into your current this new project that you have, a health and wellness coach? How is that? Is that kind of gone along with feeling good? Is that where did this come from?
Yeah, so I started health coaching for a company called Noom pre-pandemic. So it's that wellness app on your phone.
Yeah, I've
it's
seen that.
primarily to help people with weight loss and, other things, a wellness app. So I started coaching for them, online coaching at the beginning of 2020. And then we all know what happened. So I had to put that on hold as my family and I got through the pandemic with everyone home on top of each other, because it was great. I was doing this full-time coaching, first time back in the workforce since having my kids. And it was awesome. They go to work and school, and I had all this time and space to work. And then kids were home e-learning. My husband was running a school from home. It was crazy. So I had to put that career on hold. And then fast forward, we moved to China, come to consciousness, and decide I'd like to get back into health coaching, this time with my own business. And I'd like to eventually help fellow adoptees with any sort of health issue they might be having. And it may or may not be related to having been adopted and going through the adoption experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What stage of launching this business are you in? Are you like in the I'm preparing my things? Are you like I'm about to roll out? Are you like I need clients? Like where are you at? What are you excited about? Yeah.
Good question. I have launched my business. I've launched my program. It is called the Epic Method. It's on Instagram. I've been doing all of my marketing through Instagram since I'm here in China. When I started this program, it was just going to be virtual clients, virtual coaching, since I'm in China and my target market is not here. It's in the States and North America, probably, and maybe some Europeans who speak English. So it was, Australia. So it was virtual coaching. And now that we're moving back to the States, I'll be able to do in-person coaching as well. I'll be moving back to Colorado. So already doing some networking and getting involved with some of the adoptee community there. And so, yes, it's called the EPIC method. EPIC stands for Explore, Plan, Implement, and Conquer. And 4 steps. Nice. It's a 12-week program working with anyone. And specifically, I designed it for fellow adoptees who are having a little bit of trouble reaching their health and wellness goals, and feeling a little stuck. Maybe you've been doing the same thing for a long time and it's not working, and you'd like to try working with a health coach, a different approach. I'm not a therapist or a counselor. However, some of the experiences we've gone through as adoptees come into play with how your physical health is playing out in your day-to-day. So that can be emotional eating, that can be indigestion, inflammation due to diet or lifestyle, stress management. It covers a myriad of things, and it's a holistic approach. So that is the EPIC method. And I just launched it at the end of January. And I love it. I love health coaching. I love working with my clients to help them improve their lives and just feel better. Lots of times general health coaches partner with doctors. So a doctor will say, okay, you need to work on this because you're pre-diabetic. And so send them home. I'll see you in 6 months or a year. And then they don't know what to do. Like, okay, but how do I do that? So health coaches will partner with doctors or practitioners to help clients stay accountable, help create plans for them, and someone to just check in with and kind of hold your hand as you work on your your health goals.
I was curious on what kinds of things go along with adoptee specific health goals. I guess I think you mentioned a little bit about, or maybe we talked about this another time off air or something, but it was like, the check marks on a health survey when you sign in. They always ask you for medical history, right? And then it never says I don't know my medical history because I'm adopted, kind of things like that. Well, what other things have you found are adoptee related in this wellness, in your wellness program, or in other things that you think may be needed?
Yeah, the unknown health history is a big one. Many of us adoptees always have to check that. And it's very defeating. And even just the emotion that comes with that when you go to an appointment, some adoptees just even dread going to the appointment for that very reason. Like, here we go, unknown. And then you go to the appointment and they're like, oh, I see that you're adopted. Oh, my cousin was adopted. And then they want to talk to you about your adoption. And you're just there to like have your zits checked, or, have your
not everyone can say, I have a podcast, go listen to it.
So, yeah, exactly. So, it's, as adoptees, it's important that we don't let that unknown health history piece of our story define us as we move through life. And it can feel very defeating. And it can also be just like this dark cloud that follows us. So it's like, you default to that, like, oh, I don't know my health history, so I'm just going to keep eating poorly and being lazy because like, this is it, like I'm doomed. So for me, it's important to empower my clients to take control, take back their health, know that there are things you can control with your lifestyle, not just diet, but how much you move, your stress management, your mental health, your spiritual health, just keeping everything alignment and in balance, because when one thing's out of balance, it just throws everything off. So empowering adoptees to do the work to understand how it's all connected, and some education along the way as to what they can change. And we're more in control of our health than we realize. It's important to know.
Yeah.
Other things that come up with adoptees are, the people pleasing and perfectionism, perfectionistic tendencies, and the lack of self-worth that some of us grow up with, just feeling othered. And that shows up with chronic pain, inflammation, bad relationship with food, because for those of us, me included, who grew up, trying to be perfect and trying to appear perfect and have the perfect body, which I'm learning more and more is like a symptom of growing up in a white supremacy culture, and diet culture is based on white supremacy. That's a whole nother conversation. It's just unlearning those behaviors and getting to a place where you're feeling better.
I think that's really fantastic. And my wife is in a similar space, not exactly the same, but a similar. And it's been really fun helping her launch her own business, and to have specifically someone who is an adoptee who gets the adoptee take, and to know someone who's aware of how all of that can affect the choices that you make, and how sometimes, like, I think I was reading, maybe I was reading a book or something, but it was like, oh yeah, sometimes like we don't really get free will because of like so much of our circumstance decides certain things about how we are, And so like for us to just be aware of like, there's a lot of circumstance, and to work with someone who you don't have to do that constant explaining. You can just like you can just be yourself. I think is such a burden to be released from, when you're also trying to do the already very difficult work of paying attention to yourself, paying attention to your lifestyle, getting 10,000 steps, getting like drinking enough water, like literally getting into the sunlight, if that's, something that is important because you work inside all day or whatever. I think that's really, really, really fantastic. Thank you so much oh my gosh. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. It has been really fantastic. Hearing your story, hearing about all that you've been up to in China, your experiences there, and hearing about your business. And I'm so excited to see how that grows and continues to help our community and beyond. If people want to get connected with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
I think just DM me on Instagram. It's at Kate Kelly Adoptee Health.
All right, perfect. And we will have that linked in the show notes. But for now, I think we're going to sign off. You can find us at Janchi Show on all of our platforms. Call in 972-677-8867. If you have a question or just want to say hello, leave us an email, janchishow@gmail.com. Support the show at janchishow.com/support. And you can hang out with me at KJ Roelke on all of my social areas.
You can hang out with me on Instagram and Nowak. I'm still on Facebook in the after party at Nathan Nowak. Patrick is Patrick in the world, and he is enjoying daddy duties at the moment. So
I don't know if he's enjoying. I mean, he's probably enjoying them, but he's probably just been like, I'm so tired.
It's ups and downs. It's a roller coaster, but we wish him the best. So send him some love on his handle. And yes, Kate, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did. It's been great to talk with you again. And and I hope to see you at Con. So back here in Colorado. Awesome. Since you said you're moving back soon. So
for sure. Thank you guys. This was an absolute honor and a privilege.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
We loved having you.
Yeah.
Listeners, until next time, Janchi Heyo.